first you'll condition your clay and then roll it out on your pasta machine. I did mine at the second thickest setting. And grab your cutter. I got these from the Sea Salt Co. They are super cute little pumpkin coffee mugs, and place them on your clay and just press down nice and firmly to get all of those spaces. I did rub some cornstarch on mine just so no clay gets stuck in any of those little gaps, and it really gives it a nice clean cut so none of the clay gets stuck. And then you can take your soft bristle brush and simply wipe off the cornstarch lightly over the clay. And if any is left over, don't worry about it. It does not change the color after baking. And after baking, if you do see any of the cornstarch left over, you can simply take some baby oil and wipe it off. For the whipped cream top, I rolled my white clay out at a thinner setting and just pressed the top of the cutter on and cut those out, and took my X-Acto knife just to trim off the rest that was left over on the cutter. And we will place those on top of the pumpkin. I'm going to apply some Bacon Bond adhesive over the part where I'm going to lay down the white clay, so that way it will stick down and we do not have to press down firmly at all, and that way it will stay attached after baking and not come off. You could also just cut the orange whipped part off and then apply the adhesive to the rim of the mug and apply the white to that if you don't want too thick of a layer, applying the white right over the top of the orange whip. So for our first look, I'm taking my dotting tool and just kind of scraping and rolling up the white clay, giving it more of a, a whipped look, if you will. And then we're gonna add some sprinkles to the top of that. So we'll roll out some really thin snakes in your choice of colors for your sprinkles. And I did them pretty thin, and I cut some pretty thin, and then I did some a little bit thicker just to give it a variety, because no sprinkles look exactly the same. And when I rolled them out, I just cut the little tip of the sprinkle off first so it doesn't look like a pointy sprinkle. Here I put it on first, and then I went back and just cut the tips off so it kind of squared it off a little bit more. And I just lay a little dot of adhesive on first for my sprinkle, and then I just lay that tiny little sprinkle on. And you'll see me go back through and kind of cut that little edge off, because I don't think it looked good when it was, see how that one's more square and then the other ones are kind of pointy. I go back through and I cut them off to make them look a little bit more square. So it's a lot easier to color your details in after it's baked, because then if you mess it up, you can easily just wipe it off with some alcohol and you will not ruin your clay because the clay is already baked and hardened, versus if it was soft, it's a lot harder to wipe it off that way and start over. So after I bake it first for 45 minutes, and then I go and color my detail in, I just use some liquid clay for this one, just the liquid gold. And I colored my details in, and I only did it 45 minutes first versus 50, so that way I can put it back in the oven after the liquid clay is on and finish it off for another 15 minutes. And I like to bake mine all for around 50 to 60 minutes in the oven to give it a nice solid bake. If you don't want to do them in 2 steps, you could definitely just go right from your sprinkles and your clay right into your detailing before you do your first bake. That is not a problem, and then just put it all right in the oven together. I just prefer the 2 steps, that way if I mess up any of the detailing work, it's much easier to wipe off. Now let's decorate the second style pumpkin. So I'm just mixing up some white liquid clay, and I just put in some chalk pastels, and I just scraped some off and mixed it into my white clay, and that way you can just make whatever colors you want. So I love working with the liquid clay for a lot of my detail work, but they don't have every single color you want. So just go ahead and make your own colors with using either acrylic paints or the chalk pastels, and that works really lovely. So for this one, I'm gonna go ahead and color in the detail lines of the pumpkin with a darker color. I kind of used like a dark gray black color, and we're gonna this is after baking the first time too, so the clay is already hardened. And we're gonna go in and just scrape that liquid clay all around it. Don't worry about it getting all over it, because it's going to. You don't have to worry about keeping it just in the lines. And just put that liquid clay all over it. And then we're gonna just take some water or some alcohol on a cloth and just wipe off the edges. And any pieces that I needed to wipe off more, I just took some alcohol and a Q-tip and rubbed it on there, and took my paper towel and wiped it off again. And then we have the liquid clay just in the edges. And I'm gonna show you 3 different kind of tones of coloring the eyes and the mouth. So for this one, with the black detail, I used a couple different colors of chalk pastels to give it that kind of golden, candlelit jack-o'-lantern glow. And I just mixed up the chalk pastels into the white liquid clay again and colored in the eyes and the mouth again. And for the nose, that's more of that indentation. I just used a really thin little pin needle, metal tool. You could also use like a toothpick or something really small, and just kind of dab it in there. And onto our final look, the third pumpkin. We're going to leave that whipped top just how it was and not scrape it up, and we're just going to color it with some chalk pastels, and you can leave them how they are and just scrape your paintbrush across them, or scrape them off onto the paper and dip your paintbrush on them. I leave my paintbrush dry and just dip into the chalk pastels and just dust over the clay. And this is before baking. The chalk pastels will not stick to the clay like this if you do it post baking. So make sure, if you want to color like this, to do it before you bake your clay. And if you get some color where you don't want it, don't worry about it, just keep going, because we can take a little bit of alcohol and a Q-tip and wipe it off. I'm coloring a little bit more than I want and getting it in the edges, because then I'm gonna go take a Q-tip with some alcohol on it, and you'll see me do that to just bring out some white in the whipped frosting part where I want it. I guess what I was going for here is more of that toasted whipped cream part, I don't know. I just had something in my head and I was like, okay, let's give this that toasted whip. I don't know. Just go with it with me, okay? Just go with it. Oh yes, here I am getting those edges a little bit darker. We got to get those edges darker, because those are always toasted more. And then just take some rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip and bring out or take away wherever the color is that you don't want it. So I was just taking it and rubbing it across the centers just to bring out that white a little bit more. And then, oh yes, I did this too. I just took the chalk pastels and held it right over and just scraped some with my X-Acto knife to give it that little bit of a cinnamon powder topping. And then take a fluffy brush and lightly dust off any of the chalk pastels that fell any places that you don't want them. And we'll move into the colored eyes and mouth part. So this one, I'm just taking some mica powders this time and getting the colors that I want. I used like a peachy color and a yellow color, mixed those up first to see if it was the yellow that I wanted, and it looked pretty good to me. And again, used my white liquid clay, mixed those together, and created that yellowy golden color I wanted for that. So for the first one, we used our just gold liquid clay. The second one, we used the chalk pastels in the white liquid clay. And the third one, we used the mica powders in the white liquid clay. So many options to color. And then for this one, I am just adding a little bit more detail with just that pinpoint tool and scraping in some lines and textures on our little pumpkin. Remember, if you want to do your coloring detail after you bake, put your lines in before, so that way those can be in before the first bake, and then do your coloring and bake it again. I just did my coloring before I baked it all on this one. Either way works. And there we have it, our last pumpkin. I'll show how to finish and attach your ear wires or post in another video, but here is each one on its own, and let me know what one you liked the best. And once again, thank you for watching, and I will definitely see you next time.